Hello and welcome to Cask Theology, a channel about theology and beer. Today we're looking into line cleaning, what it is, why it's important, and how to do it. So, what is it and why is it important? Well, beer, even in a keg form, still contains organic compounds and yeast and things like that. The pasteurisation process doesn't get them all. Now, these can actually get stuck in the pipes that bring the beer to you, and this can cause all sorts of problems, such as your beer could fob all over the place, or in layman's terms, it comes out all foamy. It can also affect the taste of your beer, since it can contaminate it as it runs through the line, and make it taste like vinegar, and nobody wants that. So, from both a business perspective and a consumer perspective, cleaning your line is essential. You won't lose money through your beer being tainted, which is the business standpoint, and you get a great tasting beer as a consumer every time. Beer in the UK is held under an umbrella of food hygiene. Now, you wouldn't want to eat from a filthy kitchen and a dirty plate, so why should you drink from a dirty beer line? So on to the meat of the video then. How do you go about cleaning a beer line? Well, while every pub is different, principles of line cleaning remain the same no matter which company or owner you work for. There are some pubs out there that have got automatic cleaning systems, but even these follow the same procedures I'm about to line out. Now, the process itself isn't that difficult, but it does have to be said. Unless you have been given the proper training by your company or landlord or owner, do not attempt this. Even though it's a simple process, there's danger involved, which will become evident as we go through this process. First off, let's talk equipment. You will need a large container for holding water. Most places I've worked at have got a container that looks a bit like this. Next up, you're going to need a few buckets. And you will need some protective gear because we're going to be dealing with chemicals that can be damaging to skin. So, gloves, goggles, and an apron can help protect you, your skin, and your clothes. Essential to the job is line cleaner to make the line cleaning solution itself. Now, this is a bleach-like chemical that's ready to kill all manner of bugs and yeast and cleanse the line of all those organic compounds. I have seen two types used over the years, clear and coloured. Both do exactly the same job, but the coloured one is really helpful as it gives a visual indicator as to when your line is full of cleaning fluid. Please do remember that this chemical is corrosive and, as a result, is really toxic. I've heard plenty of horror stories of young kids drinking line cleaner because it looks like a kid's drink. The one I use looks like it could be blackcurrant cordial. I've heard other horror stories of lines not being cleaned properly and having the chemical left in that have hospitalised people when they've drank the beer because it's been contaminated. Personally, years and years back, I once accidentally took a very tiny sip of it, which I would absolutely not recommend as my tongue tingled for a good couple of days. So yeah, keep this stuff out of the way and in a safe place where it can't cause harm. I cannot stress this enough. Okay, so we've got all the equipment and it's time to get line cleaning. The last resource you're going to need though is time. Depending on how many keg lines you've got, this is going to take a long amount of time or a short amount of time obviously, but even just cleaning one line can take about an hour. Given that most pubs don't have just one beer on tap, prepare yourself to be there for a while. As I mentioned, we are using harmful chemicals, and in the case of keg line cleaning, you generally do all of those at the same time. Now, the best time to clean your lines is when you're closed, so it's best to do it either early in the morning, which does sadly mean getting out of bed, or after you're all closed up. Now, there is a small exception to this, and that's cask ale lines. The swan neck on these lines and some other factors mean that you can isolate what's coming out of them with your bucket, and you can clean them during service, but I will come back to that a bit later. Before we get cracking though, quick word on frequency. Now, your keg lines will need to be cleaned a minimum of once every 2 weeks, but I have heard it said that you should do it once a week. This is an event, of course, that you'll need to pop in your diary to make sure that it happens frequently. Cask ale again is the exception to the rule. Generally, it's advisable to clean those when the beer on that line has gone. This is obviously because cask ale is a bit different. One, those lines are often used for very different beers, so it could be a stout one week and a pale ale the next, so you need to flush all that through. Because of the nature of cask, in that they're constantly working because they're a live product, obviously there's more yeast and stuff hanging around, so you need to clean your line as soon as possible to make sure that there's nothing in there that shouldn't be in there. So then, that's all the housekeeping out of the way. We've got the kit, we've got the time. Let's get these keg lines cleaned. Let's go through it step by step. Now, the first thing we do before we even go near the lines is to turn off all of the chillers that the lines go through. Now, Most of these are going to have an on-off switch or a switch that says line cleaning mode or something like that. If all else fails, turn it off at the plug. Now this is important because the pipes are usually chilled to below freezing, and at a later stage they're going to have water in them, and if this freezes up, well, those are some burst pipes that you don't want to be paying for. Once we've turned off our chillers, we're going to fill up our container with water. Now make sure it's had nothing in it before, because we don't want to be mixing any chemicals up. Having a designated line cleaning container is going to help with that, and most pubs I've worked in have got one. Cold water is your best bet for line cleaning, since some line cleaners will react badly with warm water and they'll become ineffective. So make sure you know how much your container holds as well, because once it's completely full, it's going to be time to add your beer line cleaner to the water. So follow the instructions on how much to put in, which will be on the back, and once it's all mixed in, it's time for the next step. At this point, we actually go near the kegs, or more specifically, the wall behind your kegs, the gas motors and fob detectors on your cellar wall. Now, like the chillers, these will have a switch to change them from serving mode to line cleaning mode, or on the older models, the little ball release thing at the bottom will lock in, which does exactly the same thing. Now, you've got to do this for every line that's getting cleaned. Next up, we're going to turn off all the gas motors on the wall for all of the lines that we're cleaning, because we won't be using them. If you leave them on, you're just going to be wasting gas that you could be using to serve beer with. Underneath all your motors and fob detectors and amongst all those pipes, you will most likely find your line cleaning line. Now, attached to your wall, you will see connectors that look just like the ones on your kegs. So disconnect your lines from your kegs and attach them to the ones on the wall, and we're nearly ready to go. Here's a little pro tip for you. If you get a bit of chalk and mark all the kegs that you took the couplers off, this will save you from having to figure out which ones to put them back on when you're all done. Okay, so our chillers are off, our tub is full of line cleaning solution, our motors are off, the fob detectors are all switched into line cleaning mode, and all of our kegs are attached to the line cleaning line. There is just one more step to go before we get this party started, and that is to turn on your line cleaning motor. I've seen a couple of sorts over the years. They're either a separate little motor that you have to plug in, or there's a gas one on the wall. Whatever type of motor you've got, make sure it's turned on and make sure that the line cleaning line is attached to your container or the pipes right in there. You don't want to be making trips back and forth to the cellar to see why nothing's coming through the pipes, because it's just sucking through air. We are actually now done in the cellar for now, so it's time to grab a bucket or two and head out to the bar. It is now time for the saddest part in all of this process. That's the bit where we sadly waste some beer. Your beer lines will generally have a few pints still in them as they snake their way all the way from the cellar to your taps. Now, if you need to record your waste and you don't know how much you've got in your beer lines, then the best thing to do is to just grab a pint glass and pour some pints as normal until your line cleaner starts coming through. Now, some lines might hold more than others, but if you jot it all down, you'll know how much of each product is being wasted, so you can then account for it later. If you've already got all this information, you can just get on with pulling line cleaner through your lines, and you can do a few lines at once. But do remember that you're going to be using one pump for everything, so if you try to do too many at a time, then the flow will slow right down to a trickle, and it's going to take forever. So we're going to keep our taps open until there's no more beer left in the line and it's just line cleaner. This, at this stage, is really easy to spot, because in the case of the coloured ones, it's going to change from the colour of your beer to the colour of the line cleaner, so in my case, it's going to turn purple, and in the case of the clear ones, exactly the same thing, basically. It's going to turn from beer colour to completely clear. And now, we're going to turn the tap off as soon as that's all through, move on to the next line, rinse, repeat for every single draft line, and now, we wait. We've now come to the part of line cleaning that takes up the most time, and that is to leave the lines to soak for a bit to let the chemical do its work. Now, specific instructions you'll find on the label on your beer line cleaner, but generally you're going to need to leave them for about 15 to 20 minutes, so that gives you enough time to like this video and hit subscribe. This also gives you time to pop into the cellar and flush some of the cleaner through your fob detectors. The venting pipes that get used when you fill those up need cleaning too, since they too will have beer and yeast in them. You should never leave a line soaking in line cleaner for too long, especially not overnight. This can damage your pipe and it can taint any beer that runs through it, or it can make it fob all over the place, and well, we don't want that, do we? Once our time is up, we're going to agitate the line, which isn't as technical as it sounds. All we're going to do is just repeat the last process. We're going to go to each one of our taps and draw another pint or two from each line. At this point, it might be worth checking on your container to see how full it is in case it needs refilling. You might also notice that your solution has changed colour. This means that it's getting rid of all that yeast and muck in there, and it's doing its job. Once we've drawn a bit more from all our taps, your bucket might be getting full, so be sure to dispose of that stuff in the proper manner, since a lot of these cleaners aren't environmentally friendly. Then we're going to go back to waiting for another 15 to 20 minutes, and we're going to keep repeating this step until the container in the cellar runs out. Once we're all out of cleaner, we're going to pop back into the cellar and we're going to fill up our container again with water. No cleaner this time, because now it's time to make all your lines safe for beer again. Once we're all topped up, it's back to the bar and back to the taps, and we repeat the first stage. It's kind of a reverse. So we're going to go from line cleaner to water, but how can we tell when that's happened? Now, as before, in the case of the coloured ones, that's fairly easy. It changes from whatever colour your beer line cleaner was to water. It's clear. But what about the clear ones? Well, there's a couple of options. You can use litmus paper, but if, like me, you don't have any of that, then whether you're using the coloured stuff or the clear fluid, then being super paranoid is the name of the game. So what you do in this case is flush out a good few gallons of water to make sure that there's absolutely no cleaner left in there. As before, we're going to do this with every single one of our lines until all of them contain nothing but water. Now, don't forget to flush out your fob detectors too, because they're still going to have some line cleaner in them, and we'll need to flush that out as well. Once we are absolutely sure and confident that all our lines contain nothing but water, what follows next is basically the reverse of what we did in the first place. So we're going to go back in the cellar, we're going to turn off the line cleaning motor, we're going to reconnect all of our lines back onto our kegs. That's where that little chalk X will come in handy. This is also a great time to clean the couplers that go onto the kegs. Just give them a scrub and rinse them in warm water, because they can get quite mucky. Once we're all connected, we're going to turn the fob detectors back into serving mode, and then we're going to turn all of the gas motors back on. Once all that's done, it's time to go back onto the bar and pull all the beer back through into your lines. This, of course, is quite easy to see when it's happened. I like to use a glass because it's easy to spot when beer started to come through. Once your lines are full of beer again, then we're going to go back to the cellar for the final process, and that is to turn on the chillers. Now, don't forget, you need to allow these chillers time to get back down to temperature. I usually give mine about half an hour. You can now pop the nozzles and sparklers on, and you can serve your beer from sparkly clean lines. Now, I mentioned earlier that cask ale line cleaning is slightly different, so I'm just going to go over how that's different now. Your cask ale lines generally aren't connected to that main line cleaner line, or any of your chillers, so you can actually skip a couple of the steps. What you do with a cask is you'll fill your bucket with solution as usual, and then you'll actually put the cask line directly into that container. You can then go to the bar, pull it through into cleaner, making sure you don't splash it anywhere, of course. Then you're going to leave it for your 15-20 minutes, agitate it, pull it through again, flush it with water, just exactly as I've outlined with the keg clean. But the difference is, because they're individual lines, you can clean them during service, because they're not going to contaminate any of the other lines because they're not connected to all the same system. You don't even need to worry about frozen pipes with cask ale either, since they don't go through the chiller and they're generally served at cellar temperature. Now you know all about one of the least sexy parts of running a pub. You know how to clean your lines. Now, if you wanted to learn more about kegs, I did a video on that, so click on the top card if you want to learn more about those. And if you want to learn a bit more about cask ale, then the card on the bottom is the one for you. If you want to learn more about theology or beer, then hit my face in the bottom right corner to subscribe. Until then, why not grab a drink from a nice clean beer line and keep asking questions.